Tell us your name.
Tony Macias.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in San Jose, January 18th, 1936. At that time, it was called a county hospital. I was the first one in the family born in the hospital, and all the other ones were born at home, midwives.
How many siblings do you have?
There was 9 of us.
And where are you in the?
Well, there's the oldest one is Dusty. Then comes Isabel, Reuben, Eileen, Manuel, and then me, and followed by Joe, my brother Chevo, and sister. Oops, I'm sorry, my sister Alice, and then my brother Chevo.
Can you tell us what some of your earliest memories that you have as a boy?
Childhood memories. We lived. Earliest memories living on Morel Road in San Jose. Morel is over by Sierra in the Berryessa area. I remember our earliest memories picking prunes. I know that was something we all did. I remember my mom dragging a box, picking prunes and dragging a box with one of my siblings in there. I don't know if it was Licha or Chevo. Living in the little 2-bedroom home. I remember being very cold in the wintertime. I remember we had a mulberry tree in the back of the barn. There was a barn there. We'd always go climb the tree. I didn't climb the tree, I was too small, but my brothers and my sisters would be climbing the tree, getting mulberries, and we just eat mulberries till we were sick. I remember playing kick the can and playing baseball with a can. We didn't have a ball. I remember playing baseball with a can with my brother. He was a pitcher, or no, I was a pitcher and he was a batter, and he hit the can and it hit me in the forehead and it made me bleed, and left me with a scar.
Still have the scar today? Still
have a scar, yeah. I remember being with my brothers that were older. My older brother Dusty had a car. And I was always envious that he never took me for a ride. And just never, never. It was too many of us. But that was something I just longed for, going for a ride. That's probably why I took the family all over the place as younger kids. Remember having goats, raising the goats. Remember my older brother Reuben had to milk the cow, and he couldn't. The goat. The goat wouldn't cooperate, so he turned around one time and I butted him right in the butt. And he got so mad that he went and got a saw and cut the horn off one horn off the goat. Started on the second one, and my mom came out and stopped him. No telling what he would have done with it. But it was going to school. I remember going to school, to Berryessa school. That's kind of what I remember earlier.
Can you tell us a story about the car that your dad and his friend drove up?
That was earlier, before I was born. My dad, coming from Mexico, landed in Santa Monica. And the story was that he wasn't making very much money. He had a big family, and so him and his compadre, or a friend, went and bought a car. Then my dad, not having a regular job, needed more money, wanted to come up here, work in the fields, wanted to come to San Jose or toward San Jose. So in the middle of the night, he hotwired a car, and my mom told a story of everybody sneaking out very quietly, loading up all their mattresses and possessions into the car, and they took off. I don't know whatever happened to my dad as far as his compadre, what repercussions, but that's how they left Santa Monica, and they landed in Gonzales, and, working in the fields in Gonzales, and that's where my sister was born. And years later, they moved up to, they come up to Santa Clara Valley. He still didn't have a job, so he landed in San Jose, but near Santa Clara on Bronco Road. Unloaded, my dad unloaded the car with everybody in it, and left them on the side of the road and took off. Now where he went, no idea, but he's probably looking for a permanent place. From there, they moved into a barn in Milpitas. Some farmer was renting a barn to different families. Each one had a stall. So my mom talked about how rough it was there living with people, and the noise and the filth, really. And from there, they found homes on Morrell Road in the Berryessa area. I guess there was some mansions that farmers used to, that were abandoned. Farmers owned them, but they would rent different parts of the house to different families. There was a couple of families my dad and mom knew that were living there, but it was really, really, the way my mom said, it was really very, very crowded and noisy and uncomfortable. But they did that for a couple of places, and they finally landed in the little house on Morrell. And my dad worked for the farmer, tending the orchard and working in the packing house. That's kind of what I remember from that area.
Can you tell us what you know about how your mom and dad met?
I really don't. I don't know how they met. They both lived in neighboring ranches, and I'm sure they went to the same little town to church and knew each other that way. There wasn't really any courting in those days. They didn't court, but my dad knew where my mom lived, and he'd sneak over there at nighttime or during the day, and he finally was able to make a hole in the adobe, the adobe house. So he made a hole so he could talk to my mom back and forth. So one day my mom was talking to my dad through the little hole. Nobody knew about it, but I had an uncle, my mom's brother, that was kind of mischievous. So he got a rock and climbed on the top of the roof of the house, and he threw the rock at my dad, and he hit it right in the head. And my dad never forgot that. But he also, to discourage my dad from coming and visiting his sister, in the little hole, he went over there and got some caca and put in the hole. And so that night when they were talking, my dad says, "You have bad breath." But as far as how they met, I have no idea. That's kind of the early memories, what they used to talk about. They never did mention much about their wedding or their first years in life. My dad, right after that, after they got married, he decided to come to United States to work. So he I think he was a bracero or just crossed the border and worked. Then he'd work for the summer, then he'd go back, and then come back, and then go back. He'd come back. He'd go home, make her pregnant, and then come back to the United States. So, but sometimes when he'd go back, he had enough money, so he opened a store, more like a little neighborhood store that never really took off. Kind of like, that's kind of the early part of what I've been told about their early life.
Can you tell us what you remember about early San Jose?
Early San Jose. I remember San Jose moving from Morel Road to Horning Street. The house was, it was modern to us, but we lived in a shack, and so this house was really like a modern place, big enough for everybody to fit, and had a driveway, and didn't have a garage yet. I remember first day we moved into the house, we were looking at the house, and I said, I have to go to the bathroom and look for the outhouse. There's no outhouse. So one of my brothers or sisters took me to the toilet. I said, what is that? He said, that's where you go to the toilet. Yeah. So that was a big, I was small, 7 or 8 years old. And
Culture shock.
culture shock, yeah, it was. It was just something that never heard of, never seen. In our early days, we never went to a restaurant or barely went to a store. The only store we knew was the one on Berryessa Road, Berryessa and Capitol. There was a little country store there. But as far as the house, my dad went and got a table. No chairs, just a table. So, but we still had a lot of boxes from the ranch, so that's what we used to use for our chairs. Until about a year later, then he went and got some chairs, and we were crowded in that 2-bedroom house with a front room on Horning. And my dad went and built 2 more bedrooms in the back of the house. And then he built a garage, and eventually turned it into one garage, a 2-car garage, and he converted it to a 1-car garage with a little studio apartment in there. Well, I call it a studio. It was another little shack. But I remember my dad working on that Horning Street, laying cement. To get the cement, he'd go to Santa Clara rail yards, and he had a compadre that worked for the railroad. And I remember going with my dad and jumping into the railroad cars that were parked on the side, and we'd dig up the cement laying around the corners because in those days it carried cement in rail cars and box cars. It was for the war effort, this during the war. So we'd clean out the corners of the of the box car, of the cement. We'd fill up the sacks and take them home, and he'd start pouring cement. He poured the backyard cement and foundation for the other 2 rooms, and he did a lot of work around the house. He put cement on the basement of that house. Yeah, that was kind of a lot of memories.